we had the dot-com crash in the spring of 2000. Then we had the subprime mortgage crash in 2008. Then we had the COVID-19 crash in 2020. And right now we're looking down the barrel of a recession coming. And it's all about the elections and the economics that are being promoted or promised by the candidates of the two major parties, Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. And I don't want to be understood as saying there's no difference between them. That's not my position. There clearly is. But most of the big differences are on issues like abortion, guns, and things like that are not so much economics. But recently they have offered their economic plans. So I wanted to talk about those where the differences between them are smaller, to be as polite as I can, than they are in other areas where their differences are greater. And even in economics, there is something of a difference. Donald Harris, what a slip. Donald Trump wants to extend the tax cuts from his time in office, 2017, which means, as usual for a Republican, he wants to extend taxes that favor corporations and the rich. That's what most Republicans have been doing for decades. But to be honest, that's what most Democrats have either allowed or also done in their time. Kamala Harris has a different proposal. She actually wants to tax people at the top a little. It's not clear how. And there's where they agree, maybe not to tax people on the tips they earn, or maybe not on the Social Security they get when they retire. But that's about it. The other changes are small and not so different one from the other. I think it's fair to say that on the three great issues of economics that confront the United States today, what we get from Donald Trump and Kamala Harris is mostly a massive dose of silence. And that's what I want these three Wolff responds to talk about. The first one, right now, is the problem of instability. Our economic system is unstable. Now, you can call that the business cycle. Makes it sound less horrible. But here's what it means. On average, every 4 to 7 years, the economy tanks. Millions of people are thrown out of work. Hundreds of thousands of businesses go belly up or get smaller. We go through a very hard time. Tax revenue to our cities and towns and states goes down, so they can't afford to help us in important ways just when we need it most. A strange way to organize a system. It's a roller coaster. Inflation now, recession then a boom, then a bust. We have all these words for the what? The instability of our economy. Right now, as we head towards this election, the whole wonder of the world is, will we be going into a recession this month, next month, early next year? Will the inflation we just suffered come back to whack us again? What are we talking about? We're talking about a system whose instability is a threat to every person watching this video. Your job, your future, that of your community, that of your children. All of that is going to be bounced around by an unstable economic system. By the way, it has a name. It's called capitalism. It's been a roller coaster instability ride for centuries. The real economic question before us is, are we going to continue to live our lives never knowing from 1 4 to 7 year period to the next whether we're going to be hit by an inflation or a recession? We watch as our government helps us get out of an inflation only to worry about the recession, or gets us out of a recession only to worry about, oh my goodness. What we need is a leadership from either party, better from both of them. What are you going to do about the instability that we live with? That's a really important economic question. And what have the candidates to say about the instability of our system? Nada, zilch, nothing. You know what that means? It means they don't want us to think about that, and they don't want us to talk about it, and they don't want us to be critical of them, neither one nor the other. There's an unspoken conspiracy of silence. And you know what that teaches us? That neither of them are dealing with that problem or are likely to. And that's a problem. If you got two political parties, both of whom are cheerleading for capitalism, then they will not show us, let alone deal with, the huge problem of instability that this system presents to every thoughtful voter now and right up until November. I want to respond today to the stock market crash of August 5th. I'm sure you all saw the screaming headlines that day. You may have seen that there was trouble already in the week before. And at this point, no one knows whether the crash is what happened on August 5th or whether it will resume, whether it will correct itself. It allows me to remind everyone that capitalism is an extremely unstable system. It's one of its major flaws. Every 4 to 7 years, on average, the capitalist economy crashes in every country for the last 2.5 centuries at least. Every 4 to 7 years. And who gives us that number? A part of the U.S. government that keeps records. It's called the National Bureau of Economic Research. They track when the crashes happen every 4 to 7 years. And let's do an example. Let's take the first 24 years of this century that we're living in. 3 to 4 recessions in 24 years, right on time, every 4 to 7 years. If you lived with a roommate as unstable as capitalism, you would have moved out long ago. Yes, each one is unique. Each one has its special circumstances, and that's what the press likes to talk about. What they ought to talk about is the fact that we cannot escape this gross instability. Every recession means thousands or millions of people working hard, making a living, are thrown out of work, plunging their families and their communities into all kinds of difficulty. Recession means thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of medium and small businesses go out of business and never come back, throwing other communities and other families into turmoil. This is an awful quality, this instability. And you know, the people who run capitalist systems, they know it too. That's why they've been trying throughout the history of capitalism to do something about these instabilities, to stop these recurring cycles. They like the word cycle because it's not as scary as the word crash or crisis or meltdown or any of the many words we use to describe something that plagues us so many times in each person's lifetime. It's remarkable how bad this is and how we have failed to find a solution. That's why I could pick an example of this century, of the last 24 years, to show you nothing has been achieved in preventing these things from plaguing us. The greatest so far, the crash of the 1930s, led to a whole new economics of how to try to fix the recurring breakdowns of the system. It's called Keynesian economics, after the British economist John Maynard Keynes. But despite all that he figured out, and he was a great thinker and writer and politician in Britain, we still don't have a solution. So the logical thing is, if you can't fix it, maybe you ought to replace it. Maybe what we ought to look for is an economic system that doesn't bring with it these cycles, these every few years, either an inflation or a recession, or worse, a recession that is the way we get rid of an inflation, and an inflation is how we get rid or overcome the recession. It's pathetic that we don't dare as a nation to say, hey, maybe we can do better than capitalism with its instability that hurts so many people so many times, year in and year out, and for which many smart people tried and failed to find a repair. Let's replace. It really isn't that different from that moment you have with the repair person who comes to fix your refrigerator after it breaks down for the umpteenth time. The sad eyes of that repair person saying to you, look, yeah, I can fix it a bit. It'll hobble along, but in a few weeks, you'll call me up. You'll bring me out here. That's another couple $100 for sure. I think the time has come for you to face the fact you need to replace it. Otherwise, you're throwing money away, which I can see you don't need and you don't want. We're in the same situation. We can do better than capitalism, and we can start by organizing our economy so we don't allow instability to oppress us the way it does now. We had the dot-com crash in the spring of 2000. Then we had the subprime mortgage crash in 2008. Then we had the COVID-19 crash in 2020. And right now we're looking down the barrel of a recession coming. In the first two, I spoke about how the two major parties and candidates, Trump and Harris, have been mostly silent about the most fundamental issues that economics can bring to the fore. The stunning instability of capitalism as it rocks us back and forth into dangerous and damaging inflations on the one hand, recessions on the other. And secondly, the damage of a horribly unequal society, and how neither party has anything like a program to really deal with it, as opposed to making little adjustments on the edges. In this third of these three, I want to talk about the horrible, deafening silence of Trump and Harris on the third great problem of our economy. And this has to do with how we organize the production of goods and services, the core issue of economics. How do we go about producing the food, the clothing, the shelter, the very instruments that you're using to watch this video? We organize them in the same way, whether it's a factory, an office, a store, all of them. A tiny group of people at the top make all the key decisions. The owner of the business, the board of directors, if it's a corporation, they make the decisions what to produce, how to produce it, where to produce it, and what to do with the product and the revenue at the end of the process. We allow a tiny group in that position. We don't elect them. We don't control them. What does that mean? It means that the workplace in our society is undemocratic. It's not like where we live. We vote on who the mayor is. We vote on who the congressperson is. We vote, etc., etc. We have at least some say over the people whose decisions affect us. But 5 days a week or more, we go to work, we step into a workplace where we don't have that authority. We don't have that power. We don't have democracy. We have autocracy. We have a tiny group of people who make the decisions we have to live with. Sure, we can quit. And you know what happens then? We go look for another job. And you know how that job is organized? In just the same way. There is no escape because that's a system. It's called capitalism. Employers and employees. We give it a different name because unlike slavery, the people at the bottom don't have the right to quit. They're slaves, masters and slaves. In feudalism, remember, lords and serfs. In capitalism, employers, employees. Why do I stress it? Why is it so important? Well, let's go. Let's do the work. If there's a tiny group at the top, guess what they're likely to do? Grab most of the wealth being produced in the factory, the office, or the store for themselves. That's why we have endlessly worsening inequality, because we've organized our businesses in this undemocratic way. Kings used to live in opulent palaces while the peasants didn't. That was the way they arranged it. Our CEOs live in palaces we can't afford because they run the business. We just do the work. Come on. If you're serious about the economic system you live in, you face the particular way you've organized it. Because that's why we have the rest of the problems in our economy. We've organized it in this grotesquely undemocratic way. And what, pray tell, what do the two parties offer on that subject? Nothing. What does Trump say about that? Nothing. What does Harris say about that? Nothing. You'd have to have a new and different political party to say, wait a minute, we're in favor of changing. We want to democratize the enterprise. What an idea. What an interesting thing to debate. What a wonderful thing to have the right to vote for or against if you don't like it. We don't have any of that. We don't live in a democracy, and don't let the people on either party's PR team tell you it's about preserving a democracy. You cannot preserve what you're too afraid to institute in your society, starting in the workplace where most adults spend most of their lives.